session was about what is Mac, how it is impacting enterprise life, um, what are the changing expectations of customers, changing expectations of consumers, and changing expectations of value chain partners, and how SMAC is facilitating greater understanding of the consumer and deeper engagement with the employees and more connected value chain partnerships. So we went on to discuss role of SMAC in redefining, identifying new value propositions, business models. There are a lot of debates about having a non-replicable, unique proposition. There was very interesting discussion after that about manufacturing, future of manufacturing technology. There's a very interesting comment made by Dylan. Your core competency will not be redundant. You got to remold it continuously. Otherwise, you'll be out of business. So we are now on to the fourth session. A very interesting session we have today, this after lunch session. We are going to discuss what is the response of brands to SMAC. Because SMAC is enabling your customer. SMAC is empowering your customer. Customer has access to vast knowledge, a vast pool of knowledge, real time. So you cannot have control, your message to your customer anymore. So at the same time, SMAC is also offering an opportunity for brand owners, brands to understand behavior of consumer on multiple touch points. So SMAC will allow you to have a 360-degree view of your consumer. What is the purchase behavior through post data? What is their perceptions through the social conversation, and etc. So we have a wonderful panel again this session as well. Ashok Lala has over 15 years of experience in digital marketing. So that makes him one of the pioneers in this business, because 15 years ago, digital marketing didn't exist. It was called internet marketing, if I may remember right. Ashok has both industry and agency experience, and he presently heads global digital marketing efforts of Infosys, the Indian tech giant. We have Shara, very knowledgeable, experienced brand marketer. And then we have Niranjan. Niranjan is a guardian of this beautiful brand, which is meant for men. It is called Amante. And he also has extensive brand marketing experience in a previous life from his records dates. So thank you so much, gentlemen, joining us today. Then we have Shanta Fernando from Coca-Cola. He has both marketing, trade marketing, brand management, as well as sales experience, and he's leading digital initiatives of Coca-Cola in Sri Lanka. Prashant is one of the leading media investment management experts in the country, market research, advertising, and media investment management. Whole years of experience he's bringing. Siddharth is country marketing director of Unilever. And then today's session will be chaired by Himanshu. Himanshu traditionally chairs our brand sessions. And Himanshu is recently relocated as a managing partner of JWT South. So he returned to Colombo to chair this session. We really appreciate it. And you're only 1.5 hours away from us. So, we continue to hope to see you more often. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panel for fourth session.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege, Lakshman, always to be here. And thank you for having me here and all of us. So, as usual, I think Lakshman is stuck to the brief. He always ends up giving me somehow the post-lunch sessions. So the harder task of keeping everything awake is on me, and six very, very elite panelists here. So, as I understand, the room has a fair mix of people who are from the business leadership, from IT, from digital, and some bit of marketing representation, though I must confess I'm partly disappointed with the slightly smaller ratio of marketing people in this room, but I think we'll get there soon. Two quick points I want to make before we start. I think in my view, this is a time, across digital social landscape, when some of the very fundamental changes in the marketing landscape, in the brand landscape are happening. I think for long, we all have known brands which have always inspired societies, communities, countries, people. They have sort of altered their behavior, perceptions, attitudes, habits. But I think we are in a unique time when kind of, in some ways, consumer is a little ahead of us. And I think that's the realization a lot of marketing companies, brand custodians have. So this whole idea of a race between us and consumers, and are we with them, are we ahead of them, or whatever, is undergoing some bit of change. So some brands are still managing it well, but most brands tend to sort of do a bit of a catch-up, which is something which we must be sort of always aware of. The second observation I have is that, increasingly, if you look back last, let's say, 20 years or so, there was a time when most categories, product categories, were under-penetrated, in at least in the developing world. And therefore, the primary sort of thinking and engine behind any marketing initiative in any marketing company was to acquire more and more customers. As you see today, 20 years later perhaps, many categories are at a very, very healthy penetration. One would argue some categories have gone beyond 100%, like telco. And now the game and the mindset is having to shift from merely selling and acquiring to retaining and engaging. And to my mind, that's a very principal level shift in the mindsets which we all must recognize and work towards. And this conversation today is very, very relevant in that context. Because if nothing, digital and social media is a fantastic tool to be able to retain and engage, which is some ways, especially people who have been 10, 15 years at work, is a bit of a mindset shift, a cultural shift in the way you look at business, the way you define your heroes in organization. I think all of that is going to change dramatically, and it's already changing, actually. So these are two quick points I want to make. We have very, very elite sort of speakers here, and to kick off the day, I have Ashok, who's going to start with his keynote speech, and then we'll have a panel discussion. Just one point during the panel discussion, I have few queries, and I must admit, I'm still trying to transform myself, and therefore I'll have a lot of innocent queries with these experienced people. But feel free, besides sending your queries online, please raise your hand. We're very happy to have a direct chat with the audience as well. So I invite Ashok now to kick off the session.
Thanks, Himanshu. I seem to be, specializing in after-lunch sessions and last sessions of the day as well. But because I do this so often, and we've had a wonderful lunch, and I have too, there's no PowerPoint, so you'll have to just listen to me and not look at slides. It's my first time in Sri Lanka at a business event, and I'm really delighted to see such a large audience keenly interested in SMAC. To be honest, I worked in digital for many years, brands for many years, but this is the first time I'm actually wrapping my head around brands and SMAC. Of course, we do social, of course, we do mobile, of course, analytics, everybody talks about and does, cloud. But it's the first time this context of brands and SMAC was presented to me, and I think it's an interesting way to look at it. I'm not going to try and give you a prescription on how to do it, because the audience here is mixed, is experienced, and to be honest, there's some market realities specific to Sri Lanka that I might not know, and therefore what I might kind of bring to you may be alien to some market realities. What I'm actually going to talk through for the next 20, 25 minutes is my observations on these 4 phenomena and how we as brand owners, as branders, can actually make them work harder for us. What do we need to be aware of? And also, what are the things that we shouldn't really be worried about? Himanshu mentioned you could raise your hand and ask questions when the panel is chatting. If you still have more questions, I am at Ashok Lala on Twitter, ASHOKLALLA, and I would be delighted to continue the conversation beyond this afternoon. Unfortunately, I need to leave for the airport right after the session, so I may not be able to spend time with this wonderful audience over tea. I would love to, but if there's any question, I'm at Ashok Lala on Twitter. So social, you're talking of social. Social, and before we talk about that, 2 sort of brand truisms, or not brand truisms, cultural truisms that I would like to kind of lay on the table. Himanshu mentioned brands did something 20 years ago. Today, the game is changing. You know why it's changing? Because today, your brand is no longer what you tell people it is, but your brand is what people tell other people it is. That is a huge shift. We're used to creating campaigns, putting them out, ad 1, ad 2, ad 3, week 1, week 2, week 3. That is no longer happening because people tell people what they think your brand is, and you're playing catch up. The other very interesting thing is there is an increasing interconnectedness amongst people, and this interconnectedness is increasing the propensity to express, to share, and to interact. And that's where really the premise of SMAC comes in. Because people are more and more interconnected, because people are more open to expressing, open to sharing, open to interacting, the realities for us brand owners, brand marketers is very, very different. So talking of social, social is not Facebook. Social is not 10 years old. Social is not WhatsApp. Social is not Twitter. Social and social media is 5,000 years old. People wrote on walls in China 5,000 years ago. Today, they're writing on walls on Facebook. Only difference is that when they wrote on walls in China, it maybe took a few months for someone to walk by there and see it. And then that guy passed on the message to somebody else, and it was much slower. So technology is serving as a great enabler, and that's important for us to realize. Technology is not an end. Social media is not an end. A social network is not an end. They're just mere enablers. Those of us who have been in, using social media earlier on Yahoo chat rooms 10 or 15 years ago, we were in these chat rooms that said Colombo 1, New York 1, India 1, 2, 3, or whatever. Today, those rooms are dead. The conversation may be happening on Twitter, may be happening on WhatsApp, may be happening on Instagram, may be happening on Facebook. So it's really not about the network. It's about the means of connecting people to people. And what we forget as owners of brands is that the true media that we need to worry about is not social media. It is people as media. People are the fuel for our brands. And we really need to be able to drive people to connect with people and then participate in the right context. This is very important. Engagement is a buzzword we all talk about. It's about going where your audience is. It's about participating in the stream. Earlier, you built websites, which were the holy grail of a brand, and we assume build a website, people come to it. Today, people don't come to websites any longer. They go to Facebook, they go to Instagram, they go to WhatsApp, they go wherever they want to go. Us as brand marketers need to kind of find them, participate, enable them, and if possible, engage them in a manner that inclines them to our brand, to talk about our brand, to buy our brand, to use our brand, to be, inclined to recommend our brand. So it's very, very important to go in the stream. We have a hashtag for this event, and you have hashtags for movies on television these days, for the Oscars. What is a hashtag? A hashtag is a stream of interaction and conversation. As brands, we need to realize that and say, if people are interested in enterprise and SMAC, if they follow today's hashtag, you could be connecting with people in the same interest who are not in this room. That's bringing the stream and people together. As brands, we need to actually do that. A lot of people who are speaking today, and I looked out for a few names, I didn't find too many or every one of them, say, on Twitter. Simple question. Just because you don't have a Twitter account, it doesn't mean you're not on Twitter. Because Lakshman is tweeting the names of every speaker from his handle. Guess what? You are on Twitter. You are in that stream. You are tagged to a hashtag. And that is what really brands sometimes forget. I have a question for you all, and anyone can answer. Name me potentially one of the buzziest brands on Twitter, which periodically creates, there's a lot of hype around its launches and that, and it's it kind of takes over social media. Anybody? Some of you have products from that brand in front of you, and you carry it around very proudly. Sorry? Did someone say Apple? Yeah? Apple? Yeah. Apple, when they launch their phones with Steve Jobs and even now Tim Cook, they get at an average of 2,000 tweets a minute. Apple does not have a Twitter handle. Apple does not have an official Facebook page. Apple does not have an Instagram account. Apple is not officially on social media. Or is it? Something to think about, as brand marketers. And the other thing is, with social, it's about moments. And as brand owners, we need to realize that. You win moments, you lose moments. You no longer have this big bang campaign that everybody's going to talk about for weeks and months. You heard of Oreo and the Super Bowl moment? The lights went out in the Super Bowl finals a year back for about 15 minutes. Oreo did a tweet saying you can still dunk in the dark. They got like 30, 40,000 retweets. Great engagement. They went viral, but the next day, they had to think of something else. So much so that this year's Super Bowl, brands actually set up social media command centers to actually be prepared for a Super Bowl moment. So they had like agency people, their tech people, everybody sitting around in a room waiting to actually crack that moment. It didn't happen, Large brands had social media command centers. But what's important to remember is little moments can make a brand. Social media is about what I like to call the ripple effect of marketing. It's not the big bang effect. You throw a pebble into a pond, a little ripple forms. You throw a second pebble, another ripple forms. If you throw enough pebbles quick enough, the ripples form a wave. That's something which we need to think of. Speaking of waves, people are scared of what people say about their brands on social media. What if they say bad things? Well, usually people don't say bad things on social media because they're saying bad things on social media. They feel about a brand, and social media is where they communicate it. Something to keep in mind is that bad news spreads faster than good news. A few days ago, there was this rumor of this woman with 3 breasts. It went viral on social media. There were people who were agreeing to it and people who weren't agreeing to it. So the people who bought into the rumor, that spread faster than people who didn't buy into the rumor. So again, as brand marketers, we need to keep a ear to the ground in social media. Be tuned in, but don't be paranoid. If there's bad comments on your brand, look inside. Look at the product. Look at the service you're delivering. Maybe there's a fault which needs to be kind of fixed. Another very interesting opportunity really with social media is a new test market for brands. Today, you're able to get feedback before you launch a brand through social media. All of us read headlines that say leaked images of iPhone 6, leaked specs of Samsung Note 4. You know something? Leaked is the new launched. You don't have leak after leak after leak after leak just happening. Okay, these are planted, these are orchestrated. They're leak campaigns, and Himanshu and other people in agencies would actually, maybe part of actually creating some of these leaked campaigns. How do you leak a campaign? How do you stumble upon something? Something to think about. So don't kind of get excited about the next leak. It's probably a launch. The other thing is, it's a great sense of market research, which we don't kind of realize. You can actually listen to what people are saying about your competition. People can actually tune into this event, see what we're talking about, and Lakshman might have a competitor at the other end of Colombo after 2 months because someone kind of said, this is what they want. Let me give them what they want because audiences want something. Or they don't like the food, and Taj Samudra will go and talk to him and say, why don't you do your next event at Taj Samudra? So it's something to think about. You have free market research. You can be tuned in. You can be prepared. Coming to mobile. Mobile is not about the device. It's not about the iPhone. It's not about Android. Mobile is about brands on demand. Today, thanks to mobile, the World Wide Web, WWW, is shifting. It's shifting to what I like to call whatever, whenever, wherever. The consumer decides what he wants to consume of your brand. The mobile device puts that control into his hand. Mobility, apps does that to him. The brand appification is really a manifestation of that. What is a brand appification? It's not having an app in the App Store on iTunes. Brand appification is your consumer deciding what part of your brand he wants to consume, how he wants to consume it, when he wants to consume it, even if that is different from the way you want him to see your brand. There are radio taxi services in India that have apps. I would assume some of these in Colombo would have apps too. That's actually his website with a reservation engine, right? But you have your home address, you have your office address, you have potentially 1 or 2 favorites already in there, pre-selected. You only go into his brand app to place that booking from home to the office. So whatever else he wants to tell you about his brand, he's got new cars, he's got great reviews, none of that you're consuming because you don't choose to consume it. So again, that's something for us to think of. Your brand is what people tell other people it is, and our brands are now what they want to consume, when they want to consume it, how they want to consume it. You might have heard this. It's not about mobile strategy. It's about mobility strategy. It's on-the-go strategy, right? You want to follow your consumer where he is. If you're a service brand, all the more reason is he checking into your competition's bar or coffee shop or hotel. Are you able to kind of track him down there? Is he passing your store? Can you ping him offers if you have a profile of the guy? So it's brands on the go, consumers on the go, everyone connected to everyone. Platforms are only enablers. It makes it very, very difficult for us brand marketers because platforms keep changing, devices keep changing, browsers keep changing. How do you actually keep up? Well, simple way, you don't. You don't worry about keeping up. You worry about going where the user is and trying to create consistent brand experiences there. And that's where cloud comes in, which is really, if you have to worry about video formats and upgrading your website and your servers all the time, you wouldn't be a marketing organization, you might become a tech organization. But thanks to YouTube, you can actually kind of use, you can actually, go where the user is, use things in the cloud, and therefore not incur cost. So cloud does three things, and two things are sort of evident, and people in this room might actually relate to it, especially people who are on the business side of things. Cloud allows you to compete. So Instagram, cloud gives you infrastructure on demand, infrastructure as you use it. So you don't need to sink in costs on CapEx, capital expenditure, to actually set up your infrastructure, but whatever you use is operating expense. Instagram grew and grew and grew and grew because they used cloud to host all those wonderful images with a 50, 60-person organization that was bought out for $1 billion. If Instagram had to get to that scale without cloud, they would have to sink in investments of a few $100 million, which would completely, be infeasible. So the entire startup ecosystem, I'm not sure how strong or vibrant it's in Sri Lanka, but just little north of Sri Lanka, Bangalore is the hub of startups in India. And this whole startup infrastructure is based on cloud. It allows you to compete. What it also does, and brands, the big brands who are getting hurt by the small guys growing are realizing, it allows you to actually bring together audiences. You can create businesses out of what you actually are creating on the backbone of cloud. So you could actually have stuff out there, you could aggregate audiences and actually sell them to advertisers. Today, Facebook allows you to put your albums on Facebook. So they're giving you cloud storage for free, and then they're aggregating your user behavior, selling it to advertisers. YouTube is doing the same. Today, we use Facebook as photo albums because we don't want to store them on our hard drives, and we don't want to pay for data storage and the like. That's cloud storage. That's free for the end user, but the brand, here's is a brand who's actually benefiting from it. So when we are brands, we should think of it both ways. Think of how we need to be more agile, because it's cutting the entry cost, entry barrier down, and at the same time see how we can actually monetize it. Analytics. Now, analytics is something that everybody believes they're doing a damn good job. It keeps people up at night. What's the story on analytics in the context of social, mobile, and brands? And that's where it kind of gets interesting. We have more and more and more and more and more data. We have too much data. Every tweet is a data point. Every interaction is a data point. Every new account created is a data point. What do we as a brand who has a social media presence, who has a mobile strategy, who has a brand out there, who has infrastructure, do with all that data? Very often we do what most brands do in the first instance. We analyze the data in what I like to call in the stream. So social media data gets analyzed as social media data. Facebook data gets analyzed at Facebook Insights. Twitter gets analyzed there. And then we kind of say, I did so many tweets and I got so much engagement, or my tweet engagement ratio is X. I believe that's missing a trick. And as business owners and as marketers, if we really need to make analytics deliver value, we need to use analytics in the context of what the business requires. So very often, the CEO of the company is not chasing a tweet engagement ratio. He's chasing a brand awareness or a unaided brand recall score. So it's our job to use analytics to actually draw the connection between the in-media part of what the analytics give, to extrapolate it across a difficult kind of middle ground, because it's not as easy as taking a tweet ratio and converting it, and delivering it to business in the context of their need. Because when we do that, then we are truly placing and using analytics effectively and not just kind of getting into analysis paralysis and doing more and more of it, or worrying about the trivial and missing the bigger picture. So that's very important to do. Obviously, the social media manager or the community manager, his or her scope is restricted to what's done on social media. So then it takes an understanding of the business, it takes an understanding of the media, and say, what in the media does one have to do? What volume of tweets do we need to put out? What kind of content do we need to generate? What kind of tweet engagement ratio do we need in order to move the needle 1%, 2%, 5% on the brand metric side? So that's something that's really, really important to do. Digital is a big opportunity. We can't miss digital. Is digital in your media plan? How large is your media plan? Yes, yes, yes. Digital is here to stay. It's not about digital marketing. It's about marketing in a digital age and all that. At the same time, we need to kind of step back sometimes and take a context. And I'll use an example from India I'm familiar with. In India, English is the language of the internet. So largely, you still need to go offline into regional newspapers, into regional TV channels, because there's not enough regional content over there. So outside the top 10 or 20 cities, the cool digital campaigns that we kind of hear about or the viral digital campaigns is not a reality. So that's a context to realize that, yes, there is an audience, there is a greater adoption. The lines are blurring because with mobility, you actually are using the internet from a mobile device before you're using it from your desktop computer. That's happening in India. More and more of the new adoptees of digital are doing it through a mobile device as their first internet access device. That said, there is an offline world. There is a retail reality. There is a disconnect between CRM systems and social media, because the CRM data is in many cases far more well-maintained, far more protected. Social media is the outsourced service for a lot of our brands. It's changing. Airlines in India are changing. Today, if you tweet Jet Airways, they do have a means of taking your Twitter handle and checking against their database and getting a call back from their CRM team and not their social media team. Earlier, social media teams handled social media queries. Now, actually, customer relations is actually handling it. That said, it's still a slow burn. If you had $10 million to spend on digital in Sri Lanka, and you went to Google and said, look, I want to run this campaign for whichever brand, chances are you'll have 5 million or 6 million of that unspent, because you won't get enough impressions to deliver the search queries to. There have to be people on Google searching. After they search, they need to see an ad, they need to click on it for you to pay. So if you actually had unlimited money, digital might actually not be where you want to be, and you might still want the front page of that newspaper, you might still want those billboards, you might still want that airport advertising, you might still want to be on radio. And the other reason you want to do that is that while we like to believe that we are all digital and we're all tuned in all the time, we do have a life outside digital. And if in that period of time, a marketer, a brand needs to actually talk to us, the only way they can do it is actually by going where you are. If you listen to radio on your drive back from work, and you have some fabulous English FM channels in Colombo, if I need to talk to you as a brand, I need to be on that FM channel. Being on digital is not good enough. So it's a sort of a reality check. I'm a digital marketer. I've done it for 15 years. But at the same time, sometimes one has to be kind of circumspect and say, yes, it's great. There is a level of engagement, people out there, but it's about them. And we need to recognize it's about the consumer. It's about their context. And at the end of the day, people want to talk to people. Social media is an enabler to do that. People don't want to talk to brands. Brands are an intrusion. Brands are an interruption. Brands are a disruption to them. Of course, I mean, Facebook is giving us free social networking at a price. So we are aware of it. We're not very happy about it. And the more and more brands who want to put out messages saying, talk to a bottle of juice or talk to a brand of pen or a fabric brand or something, you're like, you want to talk to your friends. And you wouldn't be friends with a brand. So that's something, again, to keep in mind. So it's not about, do we have a SMAC strategy? Is, do we have a brand strategy? Do we have a marketing strategy? And what elements of that marketing strategy manifest and how they manifest into a mobility space, into a social space, into an advertising space, into a retail space, and how they actually connect the dots. You can't be something else on Twitter to what you are in retail. You can't be something else with your end brand experience when the product is consumed or used to what you try and say on Twitter. You can't be funny. People like to have fun on Twitter. All brands are not fun brands. So we need to be cognizant of that, keep the premise of what the brand is, what the marketing architecture of the brand is, and wrap S, M, A, C, and whichever other alphabets and acronyms we want in that context. Thank you.
Hello. Thanks, Ashok. That was really enlightening, and I think a good sort of conversation starter for us. So now I get into a specific chat which we've been trying to have with our panel members. So this is open to all of you. One of the big things, which Ashok talked about, we all know, is that somehow the time lag between a marketing initiative or communication initiative and a consumer feedback. From an earlier time, where you would wait for 3.5, 4 months, 5 months for one research agency report, and then you'll deliberate on it for another 3 months and do something, to now, where pretty much the same evening after the second spot on air, you start getting a sense of where this is headed. Now, so therefore, the time lag has kind of shrunk to zero, pretty much. How do you cumulatively feel about this whole new challenge and new dynamics of consumer feedback shrinking to this degree? And how is it impacting your sort of marketing decisions, plans? So this is advertising. So this is commercial break time. As Siddharth thinks over the answer, we'll be back in 2 minutes. Thanks.
Platinum sponsor. Superior online gaming. HD video streaming. Fastest download speeds. Contactability. The fastest growing mobile 4G LTE network in Sri Lanka. Mobitel, we care, always. Gold sponsor.
Never stop persevering. No matter what happens in life, we believe in never giving up on what's important to you. AIA Insurance, the real life company.
I've installed the OS for you.
Okay, great, thank you. Hi Mom, hi Dad. I just moved into my new dorm, so I'm very excited to show you what I've done. This is my bed, and I put in the lights that you gave me as a present, so thank you, it looks really cozy now. I miss you so much, and I miss your cooking. I have to get going now because it's getting a bit late, so I'll speak to you soon. I love you. Good night. Bye.
School is out, the summer's in. You and I, we smile and we begin. Sweet summer harmonies. Come cuddle close to me, 'cause I know we'll never know until we learn to love. Until we learn to love.
All right. So, Siddharth, over to you.
Provided this is working, check. Okay. For a moment, I thought I'd make you repeat the question, but I do remember what you asked before the commercial break. Now, as some of us would say, this commercial break was it engagement or was it interruption? Yeah, so that's a question for you to think about. But I think coming back, Himanshu, to the question that you raised, I think for marketers and marketers, especially like me, I think this presents an extraordinary challenge. And it's also great, exciting times for us to have, to actually lead brands and steward brands in an era where feedback from consumers and stakeholders is so instantaneous. First and foremost, in order to kind of understand the situation, it is my submission that actually, if you look at it, while we talk about living in a digital age, digital marketing, etc., etc., my own personal point of view is that nothing has changed. Yeah, marketing or good marketing was always built on consumer insights. It will still remain built on consumer insights. There is nothing called I'm a digital marketer, because literally you don't hear people saying I'm a radio marketer, I'm a TV marketer. Digital is a way of life. It's a medium of communication. The challenge, of course, in digital is that it's shifting grounds. It's constantly evolving. It's very fast. The moment you seem to profess to understand it, something new has happened. So therefore, because it's constantly changing and constantly innovating, there is this thrill of challenge of constantly learning something new. So all of us, whether on the panel here or whether in the room here or outside, we are all digital practitioners, or to take it even more realistically, we're all digital students. Within that, if you were to then look at all of us as digital students, it's tremendously fascinating. As an intellectual challenge, as a marketing challenge, to be confronted by marketing campaigns that literally get either knocked down or acknowledged the next day. Yeah, Ashok talked about moments. That's what's literally happening for a lot of brands, where you get instant real-time feedback. But I think if marketers like us are backed by solid, genuine insights, the way that we've been for so many years, we will still be able to engage with and more powerfully bond with consumers in this digital world.
Yeah. I'd just like to add on to what Siddharth said. In terms of whether it's a challenge or an opportunity, actually depends on how ready the organization is. Because we work right across several clients. And what we find is, whilst this information is readily available, a lot of the clients are happy to know that the information is out there, but they're not structured in a way to actually act on it. An excellent example, which I like to quote from an international case, is Qantas. Qantas has, which is Australian Airlines, has used GPS with cloud, with this SMAC technology very effectively, where inside the terminal, if someone was to make a complaint about the airline, once they have entered the Sydney or Melbourne airport terminal, via GPS, they're able to track who this individual is, where they are in the airport, and get one of their representatives to move in there and solve the negative vibes that are, or the, whatever negativity that is caused by that. So there is an example of where they are almost reacting to this information in real time, and they've been able to structure the organization to deliver on that. So they have turned it into a source of competitive advantage. One of the reasons organizations cannot structure to deliver is one is the fact that it's changed to start off with. The second one is that we have traditionally been broken into functions. So you have a marketing department, you have the sales department, you have the manufacturing department, and so on. But today everyone was talking about segmentation of one, and where consumers are almost co-creating. If you are going to co-create at this level, and there are excellent examples of Nike, Adidas, and so on who have actually gone to that level, then the organizational structures also need to change. You cannot think of functions, you've got to think of the mission at hand. The mission at hand is actually being able to provide the customer with that value that SMAC technology actually offers you. And in that context, then we have to overcome this silos thinking of that we are from different departments and just keep the consumer mission as our core target. Yeah.
So, but one of the other things, amongst the people who continue to struggle with the dynamics of this sort of velocity of feedback, if you like, is many brands tend to jump into short-term actions. It's almost seen as a tactical or topical sort of moment to just throw in a discount, just push something. So, I mean, it's almost like, figuring out an opportunistic salesman's sort of position in that space. So you hear a conversation, right? And you say, okay, these guys are looking for this, let me just throw this and get on with it. So my question really is that while that may be okay once in a while, are brands often losing sight of the long-term sort of building blocks of the brand, right? And the consistent sort of position they need to maintain, rather than just getting sort of greedy on the way by looking at small little opportunities and doing some things which are very, very random. And you see that very often happening. The point which Ashok made about you behaving in a different way on Twitter, behaving differently at a retail space, in your advertising, and I think that perhaps is one of the reasons. So do you experience that? Do you face the challenge at work? You?
Yeah. Okay, so there are two answers to that question. The first is, as long as your disruption and whatever you're trying to do is within your brand architecture and brand DNA, a core competency, then there's one school of thought that argues that you're not actually disrupting. I mean, we connect with brands to brand meaning, right? So as long as the brand meaning remains consistent, whatever other product extensions or variations that you do, you're not disturbing the brand core value. The second school of thought on this is basically that self, and it's the argument of being like almost marketing myopic. So if you have the capacity to listen to customer requirements and then continuously innovate, that continuous innovation in itself can start creating a new brand meaning for you. There are different ways that we define what Apple actually represents to us. But in a lot of ways, Apple's going into areas that are not traditionally been known as Apple territory is part of this whole journey. And in doing that, they're actually taking their expertise and the brand meaning from being someone else in this panel actually spoke about it earlier, a design-centric company, to one that is now going much bigger in terms of its brand definition. It's not an easy thing. It's not something that we can prescribe because it's an art and not everyone gets it right.
I see this quite differently, really. I think it's very game-changing in many ways. And maybe I'll just take you back to an example of what happened with Craigslist. Craigslist. If you remember in the good old days, the newspapers, they used to actually have their revenue model based on classified ads. And that's how they made business, made money, not really on just subscriptions and readership. Eventually, the Craigslist of the world, Craigslist came in with something like 80 million classified ads coming out and something like 15 million unique visitors. What happened to the newspapers? They started falling apart, and Craigslist was there. What did Craigslist do? They did it with 32 people in one place, and not having the huge amount of processes and systems and peoples everywhere else. Now, what we have to understand is there's a huge amount of obsolescence that's going to come in. And so it's a model change. It's not just about a brand, it's about how you do everything. So the whole idea of retail spaces is very different now. So you'll find a whole experiential thing on how retail spaces are. If you're looking at your brand architecture, the whole communication, it's because it's much more crowdsourced, it's much more uncoupled, it's not centered from an ad agency and a marketing department. It has to be delegated across all sorts of different touch points, and it's very conversational, it's two-way. It's a very, very different process, and unless we get our heads around this and realize that we really have to game change, I think we're just really writing the death knell on our brands.
I think I want to build on to what Siddharth said, because rules of marketing actually remains the same. Only thing is the mix is changing, because nowadays consumers are more educated because of all this digital world, social media, access to internet. So everyone knows what is the internet penetration. Because of that, people are educated and they have access to information. So because of that, traditional media to whatever the digital media, the mix is changing, but still the traditional ways are dominating. And it depends on brand to brand also. If I take the brand Coca-Cola, it's more or less a occasion-based marketing. Like in which occasions you consume your brand. I can add on to what Ashok said, on-the-go brand. So it's a brand which consumes on the go. It's a brand which consumes immediately at home. So how you communicate on the go? Maybe through mobile. How at home? Through TV or through press or through radio. So while things are getting dynamic and changing and challenging, the thing is, it is more and more challenging to the marketers, because our consumers are intelligent and educated. So while the rules of the marketing are same, it is more challenging for us to how we satisfy them and how we communicate to them, how we reach to them.
So as we see, there are a lot of dynamics at play, and I'll go back to Ashok just to respond to one area in this. You know, traditionally we've all been born and brought up, and we've done our degrees studying this whole classical ADA model of how consumer behavior or purchase decision process sort of undergoes a certain thing. And you made a point about the fact that it's more important today what people talk to other people about your brand rather than what you transmit to them. In that light, do you see any significant shift at a conceptual level first in the way the purchase decision process is going through today in the light of this whole SMAC environment?
Purchase is still driven by value perception. So people can say what they want about a brand, but if I don't relate to it and it doesn't serve my purpose at the right price, at the right place, in the right manner, I wouldn't just get swayed. Initial trials maybe, because what's cool does trend. So it's called trending on Twitter for a reason. It's trendy. But does that sustain? After a point, it comes back to the fundamentals of a good product, good distribution, good price value, delivery. And minus that, social is not going to change those fundamental tenets of human behavior, human interaction, human aspiration, desires, and fulfillment that brands kind of strive to do.
Just want to add to Ashok's point, that is not only the purchase decision, but the whole purchase cycle is being quite radically altered. I mean, in our industry, come from a lingerie brand, there's so much more of information search that takes place prior to any consumer actually going to a store or indeed ordering online. And even once, supposing they choose to go to a store, even within the store, They're able to compare brands, look at what's happening with other, other outlets, and make the purchase decision. Having done that, even in terms of how they want the product delivered to them, is also changing. They may choose to have it delivered to their house. They may choose to have it delivered to a store close to their house, or indeed they may pick it up from the store. And not only that, then if they are not satisfied with the product, they can even return it, and that too, in depending on what the agreements are. So the whole purchase cycle, not only the purchase decision-making process, but the whole purchase cycle is changing quite radically due to this digital piece.
So I'll just add, there are brands, and this is happening in retail, that actually give you a URL, a QR code next to a product and say, why don't you check out what other consumers are saying? So they're using social, mobile, web in a very smart manner in retail, saying rather than you pick up the phone and call somebody, why don't you check what they're saying about this product? Now that's like making marketing work harder, taking it to the next level, and not just superficially saying, I have Twitter, I have a hashtag.
So, sorry.
Could I just wanted to pose something to Niranjan about a conversation we were really having out in the corridor. I was listening to the earlier sessions and I felt that it's heartening to see so many smart young people in the garment industry, which I feel has been quite anachronistic in some ways, being good Boy Scouts at manufacturing and not realizing that they should be building brands. But my question or my challenger to him was that half our problem across the board with marketeers here is that we don't realize that Porter's model is out. That's an industrial age model. The whole value chain that lots of people have talked about and even what Dylan presented is really out. Porter is in bankruptcy and that just doesn't work any longer. We have to understand that this whole SMAX thing is really about knowledge, and through that knowledge comes a degree of customization. So I see the garment industry, for example, soon being, people will be sitting and figuring out, I can get this fabric here, I'm getting a printer, a 3D printer, and getting their clothes out. And if they don't see that, and they don't therefore try and go towards, finding ways in either like Uniqlo, they produce a really differentiated material, or they go into the value add in terms of the knowledge service and say, what, Himanshu, you might look better in this because if the cut is here or there or something like that, and they value add, not to just pure manufacturing, there are going to be problems.
So one of the big things, even in the morning before lunch, I heard, and I'm sure, which keeps coming back, for conversations, is this whole word called engagement, which seems like the biggest currency of this space. My sort of long-standing unanswered question on this is, and maybe Prashant, because you obviously advise a lot of clients to adopt digital strategies, maybe we can start with you on this, is how do you sort of understand what is engagement really about? You see a lot of marketers getting excited. In fact, in Colombo, we often see this big press releases saying, so-and-so brand has 1 million likes and so many thousand followers. Great. What does it mean? And more importantly, how does it correlate to any business or brand advantage or gain?
Okay. There's so many angles to start answering that question from. Actually, there's something that Ashok spoke about, which we as an agency is prescribed to. He spoke about moments and several moments connecting to create a wave. As an agency, we push a concept called beyond the one night stand. The thinking there was that a lot of people get involved in frivolous activities online based on their understanding of what the digital consumer is. And that is engagement for the sake of engagement and just getting a like or whatever the other parameter that they want to measure on. What happens invariably is that the person actually engages your app or whatever quiz or whatever that you have done there, but there's very little brand being created online. And in different forums, you will hear how target audiences are migrating to new media. And what will happen in approximately 15 years is if you don't start building brand online, even within this space, in around 15 years, your ability to build that brand, what I call brand meaning, would have diminished. So when you talk about engagement and what engagement means, I think it really comes down to how you define the role of digital in your overall strategy. There's a lot of argument that, like you said, like is not a good enough measurement for engagement. Yes and no. There are brands like Disney that actually like to build that community and have that like, because after they have built it, they actually use it to research whether their latest product is going to work or not. So they use it for social listening, even within that community. So their objective is actually to build that in terms of likes. The most common denominators of whether engagement is a successful strategy is whether you have repeat usage, whether people keep coming back. And in sometimes, if your engagement is linked to sales, then obviously down that funnel, whether it actually has eventuated in a sale. It can be bookmarking, it can be any one of those things that it depends on what you actually set out to do and what your digital strategy, how it was defined. And that is the only way you can actually measure and say whether a particular form of engagement is of value. Like I said, there are instances, I like to quote an example of one client that we currently service, which is SLT, where we are actually measuring it by likes. And the reason we're measuring it by likes, while everyone else says no, is that some of the changes that have happened in the SLT social media, the usage of like was earlier, it became a complaint board. And everybody used to complain about lapses in service. Today, the number of organic likes is on an increase simply because people like the way SLT responds to them using their social media platform and how that is linked to their CRM programs and how SLT actually comes up with solutions to their problems within a given time. So there's a long way in that journey, but it has started and people say they like it. So like is a good indicator. I hope I answered your question.
I'll try and address it through the example of two brands, one which I handle, one which I don't. So if you look at Starbucks, there's a global community on Starbucks on Facebook, which is one of the largest, in fact, possibly the largest community of people on an FMCG brand on a social media site like Facebook. I study that particular community because I think it's fascinating by the way that the brand has been able to build a loyal base of so many millions of consumers. But what is really fascinating is that they have then dug deep into and done analytics to actually prove that the Starbucks community fan on Facebook actually spends more dollars for coffee and other foods from Starbucks than the person who's not on the community. So obviously there is some monetary value, there's some business value that gets generated out of engaging a community, in this case through Facebook. And I think it's fascinating for all of us to actually take a look at that. They also have co-creation, they have crowdsourcing as well, and those are various other ways in which they keep the community going. Now, that's a brand that I don't handle or that I see from far. But what really has excited me in the last 1 year is a particular brand that I do handle called Close Up, which is a toothpaste in Sri Lanka. Now, brand engagement there is about engaging the 18 to 25-year-old male stroke female, primarily urban target audiences. And these are the guys and girls who do not traditionally watch television. Yeah, they do not consume newspapers to the extent that we would have in the other target audiences. So therefore, the way to connect through them is through various media vehicles in digital. And we've done that successfully. We've done a particular Coke Studio equivalent in Sri Lanka, and that's engaged scores of the target audience for Close Up. We've then gone and done and found out that they actually don't go to a retail store as you and I would go into. They actually go a lot into clothing stores. And we've done an activation with them based on digital, nothing on television, where we've been able to engage them and get them to enter into this particular activation. Now, these are just two examples. We've done 2, 3 other things as well, all of them digital related, with very minimal TV presence. And I'm happy to share with you that brand scores in terms of engagement have directly gone up. So there is a direct correlation. And Close Up Sri Lanka is one of the top 3 fastest growing markets in the world in Unilever on Close Up. So there is a direct impact to business results as well. So I think for me, the question of engagement done in a very specific targeted manner for the brand that it makes sense in can really work wonders for the brand and engage the target audience.
So one of the points I made initially, in my view, that how the era from acquisition-driven marketing, it is moving to retention, customer satisfaction-led marketing. And one of the audience question also is around the similar space. So I'll ask you, question here is to say, what's Smack doing to loyalty? And I'll frame this question more in the context of the brand you come from, that you deal with young people and social and mobile is almost synonymous in some ways. So how do you, and the big challenge I've felt with youth sort of categories or youth brands is that while they engage with these media, they're also very fickle. They're very, very transient with the conversations. How do you manage this paradox? And specifically in your context, which is very focused on youth, how do you ensure that you build sustained conversations, consumption, loyalty to the brand?
Okay. So our core TG is 18 to 24, just like close-up. So if we break the TG, who are mainly associated with the social network or the digital platform and the traditional. So like any other campaign we break, so there's a mix of the bulk of the weightage goes to the traditional media, and the mix is now changing into the digital media. Okay, so answering the main question, how we face the challenge and how do we have a competitive advantage. So as I mentioned in earlier, it is more and more, I mean, it is getting more challenging. So if we were talking about scheduling a media plan, now we have to talk about scheduling a conversation in the digital platform. So scheduling a conversation, and we have to listen to them, listen and then build it. So every brand has a brand tonality, brand voice. So based on that voice, we have to build the content. So if I take brand Coke, it's a global happiness icon, which has a certain badge value, which is built in. So consumers love to associate with the brand. In that sense, we have to create content which they would love to share with others. Our fans look good with our content. So these are the little ways and means how we should do it in a distinguished manner. So we are different from our competitors, and we will meet the challenge and take the brand into the next level.
Ashok, you have any learnings from across markets wherein, to the similar challenge which he spoke about, when you have an audience which is fundamentally very transient, like I said, young people especially, and I'm not generalizing, but yes, mostly you do find them that way. Are there any specific tools in the overall sort of resource space of Smack or the strategies to it by which you can hold on to conversations with them longer, deeper?
So it's really going where the conversation is, following the conversation, and not just trying to interrupt it and intrude and change to your point of view. So young people tend to experiment, tend to have low thresholds of fear. They flirt literally, and social media allows them to do that with brands. So you need to let that behavior happen. If they move away from your brand, if your core is right, and if you fundamentally stick to be true to what you are, you will attract people who are attracted to that rather than try and be flippant yourself. So I think keeping the basics in place, being true to your own character, and following them and recognizing them, and not trying to change or shape or force a point of view is I think fundamental to brands that do it well. And youth brands obviously invest a lot. Social media is free. Social media marketing is not. And that's something brands forget because they think that, oh, creating a Twitter page is free. But to write one press ad, you spend few weeks, few months of market research, of senior management, signing off one line, and then you put out 300 tweets a month that an intern writes. So if you keep your core right, and the larger brands who are active and doing well in social media are doing that. Brands from Unilever, Coke, Nike, they treat it with just the same care that they treat their television campaign with, and that shows.
But still, Niranjan, this is specifically for you. You come from a category in business wherein the consumer or the consumption process or buying process is very personal, very intimate, not out there. And a large cross section of women perhaps need a lot of privacy in that moment, right? When you're engaging with such consumers in the digital and social space, does it create a bit of a hurdle? Because a lot of these things need very, very tactile, physical sense and feel of it. And therefore, in that context, what role does social play for you in a category like this?
We see it actually as complementary to our core activities that we've been doing in the past. Yes, there is the touch and feel aspect of the brand, which is very important. So that physical presence, the retail space, that experience that you can provide in a retail environment is important to our brand, and we will continue to do that. But when we look at digital, we actually see it in broadly two areas. One is the commerce angle, and the other is the engagement angle. Just touching on the commerce angle, it's a great tool for us to reach consumers who, for example, don't have access to retail infrastructure. And particularly, say, in a country like India, although there is a good retail infrastructure in some of their major cities, when you go to tier 2 and tier 3 cities, e-commerce is a big part of reaching these consumers. The second is, if you take retail space that is available out there, they don't have space to carry your entire product portfolio. So there are lots of times where you actually have limited access, but whereas in the digital world, you can actually have your entire product portfolio present. In terms of engagement, it's a great vehicle for us because it does, and Ashok alluded to this, that is, how do you get that conversation going? It's not less about what we tell consumers, it's more about what they are talking to each other and telling each other and recommending. It's also a great tool to understand what they're talking about competition and trying to understand what they are doing right and they're doing wrong. We also, as opposed to feedback, we're also looking at feed forward, where you're listening into the conversations and trying to get little clues as to what is it the consumers want, how is it, what type of product offering can we provide, how do we tailor our products and product offering going forward. There is also the aspect of, they are able to pick and choose the product in the comfort of their home. Part of the challenge, of course, is you don't have the luxury of touching the product, you don't fit the product, but you certainly have, in the comfort of your room, you can choose your product. So we are finding that it's certainly adding value to the brand. The key is to be authentic, the key is to be consistent, and especially in countries like India, where the whole e-commerce players like Amazon, Flipkart, they're doing a fabulous job to really take this whole concept to consumers and overcoming some of those challenges of fit and payments and all of that. So we see it as very complementary. We see it as core to our brand strategy going forward.
I'd like to share a couple of firsts we've done in this market through Janashakti in insurance. They're all niche at the moment, but they're first. So we pioneered M insurance in a way, initially through Mobitel, then I think went to SLT and came back to us on life insurance. Then we pioneered the travel insurance, literally on the hop to the airport. You can press a number and you can get for just under $1 a day a $50,000 cover. We pioneered the Sampath Bank partnership where you can actually get a claim paid out straight from your mobile phone off an ATM without queuing, because we understood issues related to saving accounts, not having check cashing facility and the hassle of. We have a locator thing, which is basically you can download an app and you've met with an accident or you don't know where you are and you want to find out where the police station is, or you don't have to sit and tell somebody turn left, turn right, and hit this town. will find it immediately. So we've pioneered a fair amount of those things. But the most interesting part in insurance has been the ability to rectify or clear a picture. I'll tell you a very quick story about one of our guys who was actually tied to a tree, and the sales guy whose ear was nearly knocked off by some evil provincial council guy. But basically drink driving, his parent wasn't care, and he came with a gun, he tried to this. So a lot of skullduggery out there. And then how do you sit and get into this conversation and rectify it, because you're up against a fairly powerful political body also. But you can get out there on social media and you can start talking the truth, and you can get the conversation into other areas about the evils of drink driving. And it could have been your child. You know what? This is why we're doing it. We're doing it for you by not paying, because we don't want to perpetuate the evil of drink driving. And suddenly, from a bad guy who's not playing a game, you can be a good guy who's actually standing out for the poor underdog whose kids are being killed and stuff like that. So lots of interesting things you can do in this area if you're really willing to get in there and roll your sleeves up.
No, so, when marketers like Shahara, largely who represent the services sort of industries, perhaps, 15 years ago, in my experience in advertising, for example, would come back and say, in service categories, positive word of mouth is the critical thing. How do we drive? And there was one standard winner answer to say, let's do testimonial advertising. I think in some ways, the same approach is happening in social media. It's just that we're not triggering it. But I'll take the question to the other extreme, in fact. In an environment with a lot of mass consumer brands, low value purchase brands, which, but in some cases in our part of the world, for example, which are largely the decision making is with the housewife, whose sort of savviness into the space, perhaps at this moment, may be limited. How do you see this as an opportunity to reach out to, because the consumer scale is mass, it's really huge, and numbers are big to go after. But you have a fundamental barrier of adoption and understanding of this media. So how do you intend to exploit that?
So I think that's actually the heart of the question, because oftentimes digital tends to be one of these sexy topics, and typically you will hear a couple of brands, and one of the brands that I quite like, which is doing very, very good work across the world, is actually Coca-Cola in digital. But when you really consider brands which are traditionally not your urban, oriented towards male and female who are young, etc., then really your question comes to bear is whether digital is relevant to, let's say, the large masses of population in across various countries of the world. One of our fundamental understanding of digital in Unilever is that, especially for what we call D&E markets, developing and emerging markets, digital is equivalent to mobiles. And mobiles, in many, many countries, serves as the gateway to the digital world for many, many consumers, low-income consumers, rural consumers, etc. And therefore, again, it comes back to the basic question of how do you engage the rural consumer, especially in large parts of India, China, etc., where they might not have access to a whole lot of other media. And then the question really is that, do we as marketeers and brand owners have relevant insights of using a media vehicle, in this case, a mobile phone, which is a digital tool, which is available in that consumer's hands. And there are so many different things that you can do with a mobile phone, and therefore very smartly engage with consumers. Ever since I've come to Sri Lanka, it's not been very long, I have been fascinated by the way that we have here in Sri Lanka 3G and 4G. This is one of the cutting edge technology markets. And actually, we all should, as the panel here, as digital practitioners in the room, we should be all doing a lot more in digital in general and on mobiles in particular. It is my aspiration that we win a couple of what we call the Smarties in the Asia Pacific Forum for brilliant work that engages with consumers. So for a lot of brands that we have in Unilever, and I know from talking with colleagues in the industry, there are lots of exciting work which is happening. I can speak on some of them, which we are doing with brands like, iconic brands like Sunlight, which is as mass as it gets, and the whole of Sri Lanka knows and loves that brand. There's a brand that we have called Signal, which is again as mass as it gets, very different from the other brand in the same category that we have, which I just spoke about, which is Close Up. So there's lots of work that we are doing, but essentially it boils down to, do we have the relevant insight of using a mobile phone? So is it the information trigger? Is it the entertainment trigger? Is it a quiz that we can do? Is it a contest that we can get her to participate in? Is it some free content that we can offer? Is it a question of free talk time and therefore engage with the consumer on that particular basis? I think there's lots we can do. It's one of the areas that is particular focus to me and my team. And I can use the liberty of this forum to share the fact that you would look forward to many exciting ideas in the coming few quarters from our side when it comes to mass consumers using mobiles.
So moving to some of the questions from the audience, one of the questions is, when you open up to SMAC, how you manage blowback? And my related sort of query on that is that, this whole blowback business, which you also touched upon, that people get very nervous, should you not, I think brings back again to the very fundamentals of marketing, maybe, which is more valid maybe 60 years ago, which is the larger context of ethics in marketing. What are your thoughts about it, and how uneasy or easy do you feel about this changing sort of scenario, all of you as practitioners?
People talk to people in the context of brands, regardless of whether you're on social media or not. So this is the new reality. You just have to accept it and embrace it. Tune in and take steps that you can to engage effectively, understand what they're doing, go where they are, and recognize consumers for what they are. Don't second guess them. So I think that's very, very important. And don't be paranoid, because frankly, if they're saying bad things about your brand, perhaps it's time to introspect at the brand end rather than shoot the messenger.
Just like to probably agree with Ashok. It's probably better to know what consumers are talking about your brand than not know about it, especially if it's not something good. At least you can address it. You have a chance of addressing it, as opposed to just letting it lie low and lose market share at some point in time.
I just wanted to add one point to what Siddharth said, because we have this we want to always go to the digital, but we might tend to forget the power of mobile, what Siddharth said. Because I want to take a classic example. Good old days, as a junior brand manager, we are really thrilled to get 50,000 wrappers. If we ask the housewife to send, let's say, Pace Baby wrappers, if we get 50,000, that's a major achievement. Nowadays, we have the simple SMS. How simplified it is. Sri Lanka has more than 20 million mobile penetration. So nowadays, people are talking about 500,000, 1 million SMS feedback. So this is the real edge we are seeing with the help of digital and the mobile technology.
So this is all sounding fantastic, and therefore there's a hard question coming in, and I'll use the languages which is here, which is fundamentally says that 5P is out of the game, the whole classical theory is out. But why is it that companies still start feeling constipated about investing in SMAC? And therefore my sort of fact on this is that despite all these conversations over many years now, at least in our market here, on an average, and I don't think it's even industry-wide average, but perhaps the top 20, 30 market year average, the digital investments or SMAC investments are not beyond 5 to 7% of their annual turnovers. So where is it missing the trick? Is it knowledge? Is it will? What is it?
Firstly, the 5 to 7% is digital media expense and contribution. In fact, a lot of companies are spending a lot more at the back-end infrastructure, websites, applications, which doesn't get counted. So that's something to keep in mind as well. The other point I made is the opportunity itself. If you have 100 crores on media budget for large brands for Unilever, and you said, I'll only do digital, you won't have the impressions to burn it against. You still need to reach audiences. You still need to influence them. You still need to remind them. You still need to touch them last mile. You still need to touch them on the shelf before they pick up the product. So it's a fair investment. It's growing. but let's not kind of get carried away and say, let's have it at 50%. You'll have probably ineffective marketing if Unilever decided to experiment with a brand and said, we are going to shift spends entirely at cost of brand. You would actually get that data at another conference.
I think it's also less to do with the percentage that is being used. It's more to do with how do brands actually see digital as part of their core strategy, or do they just see it as an add-on to what they're doing already? As long as it's an add-on, you will get those small numbers and you will get that treatment. But if you see it as part of your core brand strategy, then certainly the outlook to it will change. And I think one way to think about it is, how does your consumer see your brand? The consumer doesn't see your brand as being retail, retail space or digital. They see one brand, and the whole concept of this omni-channel strategy is also revolving around that. I believe the rules of omni-channel strategy are probably still being written, but it's all about telling a story. It's about being consistent and offering the consumer one experience right throughout the entire value chain. So I think, for me, it's less about the percentage. It's more about how do brands and brand the management look at this whole digital strategy piece.
First of all, I don't think the 5 Ps are dead. I just think the 5 Ps are morphed into different manifestation, and some of the old stuff still is relevant. So that's the first part of that question. The second part of that question, in terms of why people don't adapt it, is I think there is a lack of understanding of how to use the technologies. And a lot of times what we've come across when we speak to clients is not enough case studies that they are aware of, which allows them to know how to use these spaces. So they have heard about it, they're all buzzwords, and they say, yep, there's a great opportunity, we see the future going there, but no one really knows, how to use it to make marketing sense. So a lot of them have a token approach to it, where it's just for the sake of saying that we are also in the space, they get into it. And one of the biggest issues is top management commitment to it, because there are a lot of people in the top management who have still not bought into it and think it's still a buzz, it's a buzzword, and it'll have its day. And sometimes technology frightens people, so they don't want to know about it. They push it to the IT division, and that's your baby. You just tell me what I've got to do. So in our experience, what we find is those are the biggest barriers to this actually taking a bigger stake in marketing in companies.
So I open the house now for any further queries. Any of you have? You can raise your hand. And none? All right, so I'll just end on an interesting note. It was a demand that we gave a thought on it, but I think we've spoken about it for last hour. There's one of the audience which says that we did not have this much of Ahu when radio or TV advertising was introduced. Online media is yet another channel to reach to your consumers. Just like TV advertising was critical decades ago, today digital has been that vehicle. The main focus of branding should be of understanding and providing customer value. So thanks for that closing sort of question, which is actually a great closing comment from one of you. Thanks for that, and thanks, Lakshman, to have us all here. Thank you.
Okay, so we conclude the fourth session, Future of Brands in the SMAC world. Thank you so much, Ashok, for your wonderful presentation, enlightening us on impact of SMAC and what are the challenges of building brands in the SMAC. And thank you so much for taking time off and flying from Bangalore to join us. Thanks so much. Thank you, Cheryl, joining us once again, and Niranjan sharing your views on building, as I said, the brand which is, I understand, meant for men. And Shanta, thank you so much for sharing your Coke experience as well as your previous experience of working with other FMCG companies, Prashant and Siddharth. And finally, a big thank to Himanshu. Wonderful to have you once again chairing a summit session. Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, please thank our speakers. With that, we come to the tea break. Time now is 3:30. 3:33, we will be back at 3:45 for the last session. Thank you. Enjoy your tea.